So there had been some rumors going around for quite some time that Zeus would be leaving SK and joining Immortals, but today it was officially announced that Zeus would in fact be giving up his coaching role on SK Gaming, the best team in the world and one of the most celebrated Brazilian teams of all time, to go join as a player and in-game leader of Immortals in place of Showtime. So I just wanted to talk about this move a little bit and kind of give you my take on everything that's taken place. So first off, to give you a little bit of history of what's been going on here, is that the way Zeus got his start was by being the coach of Games Academy. And of course, this was a team that had won this tournament called the Golden Chance that Fallen, and in the Games Academy organization that I believe Fallen leads, had put together back in July of 2015. They had announced this Golden Chance, and then in August, the NTC team, which contained Henny, Lucas, FNX, Taco, and Showtime, had won that event. And so they moved over to North America in September, I believe, and they were competing in some different North American stuff at that time, such as the RGN Pro Series LAN event and some other things. And Zeus was coaching the team at this time. You know, you could see him doing interviews and such when they were at the RGN Pro Series at the end of 2015. And, you know, he was helping, I believe at the time, Taco lead the team. But I know that there was also some different leadership going on there as well. But I remember them doing an interview together while they were at that event, and they were talking a little bit about it. But then in November of 2015, Luminosity Gaming actually gets rid of Bolt, which Bolt then goes on to play with this Games Academy team, as well as Steel, who now plays elsewhere in Brazil now. And they bring in FNX and Taco from Games Academy, and they also pick up Zeus to become the coach of Luminosity. This is what opens up the ability for now Bolt's transferred to Games Academy, and then the pickup of Phelps, and then Peacemaker comes into play now as the coach, and eventually he would lead the team, Games Academy, as they transferred over to Tempo Storm for the remainder of the time that team was together, up until Peacemaker left to go coach Team Liquid. So several months that group was together. And so Zeus has been with what is now SK Gaming ever since November of last year. He's been with them through this huge amount of growth they had at the end of 2015 and going into this year. Obviously, they won the last two majors at ESL 1 Cologne and MLG Columbus. They also won a title at the ESL Season 3 finals. They took second at Season 1 of ECS. They had several other top four finishes that stretch back to the end of 2015. And again, they have established themselves as the best team in the world throughout this entire process, and Zeus was a part of it from, you know, a while back. So there's lots of topics to discuss here. First of all, just talking about Zeus as a coach and how much impact did he really have on what is now SK Gaming. This is a very hard question to answer. I don't think we'll ever really know just how much of an impact he really had, because obviously Fallen was the primary shot caller for SK Gaming. He was the one who really called all the plays. He was the one who had put the system in place, the system that he had put in place, or at least the foundation, the slower, more methodical style of play, was already well in motion before Zeus joined the team. Yes, we have now seen them become more diverse. Now we do see them play a bit more loose. They do just kind of play default and kind of let their players play their roles, and then eventually Fallen will kind of, you know, bring them back together for whatever play he wants to run. Yes, we have seen them be a bit more aggressive. They certainly do have, you know, these heavier executes that rely more on firepower and start off earlier on in rounds. So they have added a lot to their play, but their roots are still very much there. And like I said, those were really already in place before Zeus ever came onto the team. But we've always heard reports about Zeus being a very smart guy, about helping the team find nades, helping the team build new strategies to use, you know, help them come up with new executes. Obviously, he helped them scout opponents, trying to anti-strat different people they were going to play up against. Obviously, he's offering suggestions or adding input, you know, between rounds or during timeouts. He may even add some input in the middle of a round. So he certainly still was a part of the team, and he certainly did contribute in a positive way, I would imagine. But now we are probably going to finally figure out just how much, you know, Zeus was needed for the team to be successful. Now, that's not to say that if SK Gaming goes on to continue to be the best team in the world, continues to win a bunch of titles, that Zeus was, you know, actually useless the entire time. No, just as if SK Gaming were at some point to start losing or start falling down the rankings, you couldn't automatically assume that the sole reason for that would be because of Zeus's departure. It's not as if he is the main factor in either direction. I'm sure he could be a contributing factor in either direction, but you can't really know for sure. So it's still going to be very hard to actually measure this impact. All we can really go off of is what's been said, and obviously there's been plenty of analysts and commentators who have spoken with Zeus who can see that he's contributed in all these different ways that I've listed, scouting, helping come up with strategies, helping call things, etc. Obviously, we know that's there, but just how much of it was him, just how much of it was Fallen. And I've also always heard reports that Coldzera and other players on the team also pitch in quite a lot to help come up with new plays to run and such. So it's not as if Fallen is going to be alone now that Zeus is gone. And we already know how much of a capable leader Fallen is, even when he was by himself without a coach. Before they ever had a coach on that team, when he was the sole leader of the team, he was still building them up to be, a team that was taking top 8 at majors every single time, and they were having some decent results here and there. They were starting to build themselves up already as kind of a top 10 team in the world. So, yes, they took a huge leap whenever they picked up FNX and Taco and they had Zeus on board and they started winning titles and getting consistent top 4 finishes and securing themselves at the top of the world. But again, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out going forward. Maybe we will get some type of indication on just how much value the team loses with Zeus gone. And there is that concern there that with Zeus leaving, you already had this perfect winning formula. Shaking that up, it does cause for some concern that maybe SK does drop off a little bit because of this. So I guess the question, will SK miss Zeus? Well, surely they will. He did certainly add value, I'm sure, but how much of a hit they really take with his departure is a question that's going to be very difficult to answer. I think that there's still a lot of things that make SK Gaming a great team. If you look in the description box below, maybe I'll try to do an annotation or something up there. I just did a video after SK Gaming won ESL 1 Cologne where I talked about that win and just in general what has made that team so great over the last year or so. So definitely check out that video. And the point I'm making here is that a lot of the points I brought up in that video on what makes SK Gaming great, a lot of those things are still in place even with Zeus gone. So I think the team should still be fine, but yes, there's going to be this debate and there's going to be people kind of sitting back and watching to see just how much this move actually impacts SK Gaming. But now let's start talking about the Immortals side of this. So first of all, I think the first thing you have to do when addressing the Immortals side of this is talking about Zeus as a player. Now, Zeus as a player is basically a giant unknown to anyone outside of Brazil. From what I understand, prior to, or maybe, earlier in 2015, before the Games Academy move happened at the end of the year, or towards the end of the year, I believe in like August or September, prior to that, Zeus apparently was a professional player in the Brazilian scene in CSGO. And people have also told me that, he used to play 1.6 in Counter-Strike Source and was pretty decent in those games as well. But I had never known him in Counter-Strike Source, and I don't really have much of an understanding of 1.6 at all, so I can't comment on that. But just looking at CSGO, which is most important, again, there's really no record that I could find of him playing the game professionally, but people within Brazil have come out and said, yes, he did play in Brazil, he was decent. But there's also been mixed reviews there. I've heard reports that he was actually quite good. I've heard reports that he wasn't that good. So, again, I have no real idea what this guy is like as a player. Even if he was a professional player in Brazil, this is still a giant leap here. This guy is going from having never played an international competition in CSGO to being on what should be and what currently is a top 10 team in the world. And he's, I think, 27 or 28 years old. This is insane when you think about this guy who is quite later in years for an esports player to have never competed internationally to now be on a top 10 team in the world as a player in-game leader. This is craziness, to think about it when you just look at that particular fact. The only indication I've ever seen of Zeus as a player is when he's done pickup games or rank S pugs in the North American scene, which doesn't really give you too much of an indication of what this person's going to be like up against top international competition. It does maybe indicate a little bit, can he hold his own fragging wise in an online environment against some of the best players in the North American scene, I suppose, even though rank S pugs aren't nearly as serious as an actual scrimmage or an actual official match. So you really have to scrape the bottom of the barrel, is my point, to even get any kind of read on Zeus's fragging ability. And when you look at rank S stats for him, it's not as if they're glorious or anything like that. In fact, I think overall he's probably fairly negative. So I think this could turn to a situation where he's going to be one of those non-fragging in-game leaders. You know, hopefully he'll hold his own where he's not going horribly negative and being a burden on his team. But from just looking at things, I just can't really see him being the type of in-game leader who frags very, very well. You know, like, he's not going to be like a Fallen, who's an in-game leader who's also one of the best oppers in the world and quite a good fragger and puts up, you know, ridiculous numbers. Maybe he's going to be more on the under end of the scale where, you know, you're going to have this debate on whether or not he's fragging well enough to where he's not holding the team back and he still contributes a ton as a leader. Like, there is going to be that debate there, I think. Which will, of course, beg the question, why wouldn't you just have Zeus lead the team from a coach position? I'll tell you why. Why would you want to go from being the coach of the best team in the world on SK Gaming to now being a coach for a lesser team? Unless he was going to have more responsibility as a coach on Immortals, of course, because he'll probably be the primary shot caller of the team rather than just being a supplemental leader over on SK Gaming. So maybe that would have been enough to draw his interest. Like, hey, I've already done these really great things with SK Gaming as kind of a supplemental leader role to the team, kind of contributing but not being the primary guy. Now I'm going to go be the main guy to call tactics for this top 10 team Immortals, and I'm going to see if I can't bring them up, you know, to a higher level. So maybe that would have been draw enough. Like, hey, yeah, I know it's kind of a demotion as far as coaching status goes, but you're gonna put more weight on your shoulders. You're really gonna try to prove yourself and your worth as a coach to bring this team up. Maybe, but I almost feel like it's one of those situations where if he was going to leave SK Gaming, you know, to do something else, he certainly wasn't going to coach a team at peg down, probably. So I almost feel like he had to be a player for Immortals to be able to secure him. I almost get that feeling. Now, this also begs the question of why the hell did you get rid of Peacemaker? You know, like, if you wanted to keep the same fraggers you had and still keep good leadership, or get back leadership, or whatever you want to call it, you already had that with Peacemaker, and you kind of let him go to Liquid. So this kind of makes you want to revisit that topic a little bit about Peacemaker's departure. And you gotta wonder now if there was maybe some personal issues there. Maybe it wasn't just the thing where the team strategically thought Bolts would be a better in-game leader than Peacemaker, and that was the better direction ahead. So they wanted to go ahead and let Bolts be the leader, and Peacemaker, since he didn't want to be a supplemental guy, he wanted to be the main shot caller, they had to let him go. So you have to now start to think maybe this wasn't just a strategically based decision as far as the team's tactics and stuff go, and Peacemaker got dropped. It almost makes you wonder if there was definitely something personal there now, because when you think about this move, it just seems rather odd that happened way back when now. It is certainly true that I felt Immortals did need some help in the leadership department. When you look at some of their recent results, for example, they didn't qualify for ESL 1 Cologne. They had a 1-3 showing at the qualifier where they lost to Envy and Tyloo, and then they beat Empire, but then lost to Flipside Tactics. When I was watching this tournament, which I did a video on, by the way, so again, maybe I'll put it up here, maybe it'll be just in the description box below, where I did a video called Immortals Recovery, which was because, you know, at this ESL 1 qualifier, they had those results where they couldn't qualify the event, and during that event, they just looked way more aggressive than what I was used to, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is it seemed like they lost their main identity, which their foundation was this slower, more methodical style of play, these deeper tactics, or at least when Peacemaker was the primary shot caller team, you could see that they had this really big system in place. They looked very familiar to Luminosity. There was definitely a lot of very big similarities between the two teams and how the direction of the team went. Yes, they would throw in some aggression here and there, but they had this foundation to fall back on. They had this trademark style, and then they just kind of added to it and made these slight adaptations to mix up their game. But at this ESL 1 Cologne qualifier, it seems like they kind of lost that. They didn't look nearly as crisp. They didn't look nearly on the same page. Many times they did look lost, particularly in their earlier games against Envy and Tyloo. They looked all over the place. They seemed like they had lost any sense of direction. And so you could tell that they were certainly suffering from from not having him. I feel like not having Peacemaker, that is. Like Bolts was struggling a bit to lead the team by himself, because yes, he had been the primary in-game leader apparently ever since they had won the CBO Season 9 finals back at the end of April, very beginning of May of this year. But they still had Peacemaker there to assist him, and now that was gone, and you could tell that they were missing him. They also took second at the most recent North American monitor against Optic. At that event, again, kind of similar story. They didn't just seem to be as crisp as they used to be. Well, then they did have this recovery, right? They did, in fact, win DreamHack Summer back in June of this year, where they beat what was SK, now I guess Team X, though a lot of those players aren't there anymore. They beat Ints, they beat Godsent, and then they beat NIP in the Grand Finals in a 2-0 series. Now, at this event, I still felt like some of this lack of leadership issue was still there. It still seemed like Bolts was a bit impacted, like he wasn't fragging as well. He wasn't this consistent guy for the team anymore. He seemed to have some games where he didn't look nearly as effective as a fragger, which hurt, because a lot of the reason why that team was so successful under Peacemaker's direction was because Bolts was like this rock, like this player that you could count on to deliver consistently almost every single game. And yes, you had the firepower of Phelps, who was probably the most skilled player on the team as far as rifling goes. And yes, you had Henny, who could be this flashy opper, and Lucas could do pretty well, and Showtime was quite hit or miss. But the consistency of Bolts was almost like the bedrock which the team was built around. And so he was impacted by leading, it seemed. Like he wasn't as effective. And even though they won this DreamHack Summer event with the aggression, with the little bit looser style, it was because all these guys were on form. Like even Showtime had a great event here. Everyone really did. They didn't run into too much resistance. Like everything they did just seemed to work. Like everything was going the right way. So they never really had to make any adaptations, it felt like. I'm sure they had to make some adaptations, but I'm just saying, like, they never felt like they got truly tested in some of these games. So I feel like if they would have met like a big defense, I don't know if they would have had something to fall back on to make an adjustment to still get the win, if that makes any sense. I'm just saying that even though they had the title victory, you could still tell if they could use some help in the leadership department, that still their strategy wasn't nearly as defined as it had been in the past when they were making their growth or their trend up. So at the end of the day then, what do we think about this move? What are the pros and cons of Zeus coming to the team? So obviously on the positive side, Zeus can bring leadership to this team. He can help the team's strategy. He can help the team's tactics. He can bring in new executes. He can help them scout opponents. He can do all of these great things. But then you have to wonder how much weight's going to get put on this guy's shoulders, because before there was a partnership going on with Zeus and Fallen and the rest of the team to kind of split up the workload, so to speak. Who's going to help Zeus on this Immortals team to scout an opponent? Is Bolt still going to be, a heavy leadership influence on the team? Is he still going to be doing this type of thing? Is Immortals eventually going to bring in another guy to coach the team while Zeus plays? I think they already have a coach, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that coach that was already on Immortals can work with Zeus. So maybe there will still be a partnership there. But we'll just have to see how that pans out. I know they've had a coach with them in the past few events, but I don't know how effective he is. This should free up Bolts. This hopefully will get Bolts to being back to the consistent fragger that he used to be, which is one of the primary things that made this team so good. What was his consistency, alongside the firepower of Phelps and Henny. So this should put Bolts back into a position where he can focus on, doing his job, being a fragger, and so we should see that happen. It is true with Showtime coming out that he was quite hit or miss. Yes, he had a pretty good event where they won DreamHack Summer. He did okay at DreamHack Austin, but then he had like a pretty terrible event at the CBO Season 9 finals, and he very rarely went positive across an entire event. So it certainly is true that Showtime was probably like the weakest link as far as fragging goes on the team. But I don't know if Zeus is really going to be an improvement in the fragging department to Showtime. Probably not. So at this point, you're just weighing whether or not the leadership that Zeus can bring and the fact that he frees up Bolts, was that worth it over, possibly taking an even heavier hit in the fragging department with Zeus as compared to Showtime. Which if Bolts gets back to a super high level, then it probably makes up for it, right? Also, cons, again, very huge risk because, again, we've never seen Zeus play against top international competition. Again, he is a little bit later in his years for an esports player, so for him to have his first crack at top international CSGO with really no experience prior and being, 27, 28 years old is certainly kind of crazy, which I've already mentioned earlier in this video. It's also true that he may not even be able to lead as effectively in the game as he could as a coach, right? Maybe while he's in the game and he's trying to focus on getting his kills or trying to do other things, maybe that takes away from his abilities as a tactician or as a leader. Maybe not. Maybe he'll just be a great in-game leader and the leadership will be there. And yeah, maybe the fragging's not there, but he still leads the team so well. And you already have enough firepower with Phelps, Bolts, and Henney. And even Lucas has really stepped up his game, I feel like, in the last few months, that it won't matter. So that's going to have to just be something we keep an eye on. So these are just kind of my thoughts and my initial reactions to this move. I hope that you found this video informative. Again, there's going to be a couple of related videos I've already done about some of these players and these two teams. And so I'll definitely link those below if you want to check those out, because I didn't really go too in detail about, I guess, Immortal strategy and things like that in this video, or I didn't go into as much detail about, SK's pros and cons with and without Zeus, but I did in a couple of older videos I did, so I'll definitely link those below. But again, thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, please follow and subscribe for more. Thanks so much.